You know what most people get wrong about those who never give up? They assume it comes from not feeling pain. The truth is the opposite. The ones who keep going almost always feel the weight more deeply than anyone around them. Psychology has been studying persistence for decades, and the findings are surprising. What separates people who continue from people who stop is not willpower or talent. It is something quieter and far more specific. This video explains exactly what that is. The first thing that makes them different is how they define failure. For most people, failure is a verdict. It means the attempt was wrong, the direction was wrong, or the person was not built for it. For those who never give up, failure is simply data. Research from Columbia University on attribution theory found that people who persist through difficulty consistently attribute setbacks to changeable factors like effort and strategy rather than fixed ones like ability or fate. That single shift in interpretation changes everything that follows. The second thing is that they have learned to separate their identity from their outcomes. When a project fails, they do not experience it as a personal collapse. The work failed. They are still intact. That separation is not emotional distance. It is psychological clarity. Psychologist Carol Dweck's foundational research on mindset found that individuals who maintain a growth-oriented identity recover from failure measurably faster and attempt more challenging goals over time. Protecting the self from outcome is not avoidance. It is the architecture of sustainable effort. The third thing is that they are motivated by something internal that does not depend on visible results. They are not running toward applause. They are running toward something they defined for themselves, privately, long before anyone else was watching or measuring. Edward Deci and Richard Ryan's self-determination theory found that intrinsic motivation, doing something because it genuinely matters to you rather than for external reward, is the strongest predictor of long-term persistence. External motivation burns fast. Internal motivation has a different and much slower rate of fuel consumption. The fourth thing is that they have an unusual relationship with discomfort. Most people treat discomfort as a signal to stop. People who never give up treat it as a signal that something real is happening. That reframe changes what discomfort means and therefore what it costs. Neuroscience research on pain and motivation from the National Institutes of Health found that individuals who persist through physical and psychological difficulty show different patterns of prefrontal cortex activation. Their brains process discomfort as information rather than emergency. That difference is both measurable and trainable. The fifth thing is that they think in longer time horizons than most people. When someone else is measuring progress by the week, the person who never gives up is measuring it by the year or the decade. Their patience is not passive. It is structural. Psychologist Walter Mischel's research on delayed gratification found that the ability to hold future goals in mind while tolerating present discomfort is one of the most reliable predictors of life outcomes across multiple domains. Long-term thinking is not just a preference. It is a cognitive skill with measurable consequences. The sixth thing is that they have developed what psychologists call a strong locus of internal control. They genuinely believe that their actions affect their outcomes. Not everything, not perfectly, but enough. That belief keeps effort meaningful even when results are slow or invisible. Research from psychologist Julian Rotter, who first defined locus of control in the 1950s, found that people with an internal locus show greater persistence, higher achievement motivation, and stronger recovery after setbacks. Believing your effort matters is not naive optimism. It is one of the most pragmatic beliefs a person can hold. Now, consider this for a moment. Think of a time you stopped, not because you had no ability, but because you stopped believing it would matter. The giving up was not about the goal. It was about what you believed your effort was actually worth. Sit with that. The seventh thing is that they are remarkably good at breaking overwhelming goals into immediate, manageable actions. When the full picture feels impossible, they do not look at the full picture. They look at the next step only, and then the one after that. That is the whole strategy. Behavioral research on goal setting from Edwin Locke and Gary Latham found that specific, proximate goals outperform vague, distant ones in generating sustained effort. The person who sets today's small target and meets it is more likely to persist long-term than the person holding only the distant vision. The eighth thing is that they have built a private narrative about who they are, not a performance for others. A story they tell themselves quietly about what they are capable of and what kind of person they intend to be. And they protect that story with their choices. Psychologist Dan McAdams, who spent decades studying personal narrative and identity, found that the stories we construct about ourselves directly shape our behavior over time. The person who has defined themselves as someone who continues will find it genuinely harder to stop than someone who has not written that story yet. The ninth thing is that they have really accepted, that the path will not be what they imagined. They hold the destination clearly, but they hold the route loosely. When circumstances force a change in direction, they adapt without interpreting the detour as evidence they should stop entirely. Resilience research from the American Psychological Association consistently identifies cognitive flexibility, the ability to adjust plans without abandoning purpose, as a core component of sustained perseverance. Rigidity breaks under pressure. Flexibility bends and continues. The people who never give up are almost always flexible people moving toward a fixed point. The 10th thing is that they have a very specific kind of support around them. Not people who simply cheer them on. People who tell them the truth. Who push back when the plan is weak. Who stay present during the difficult stretches without pretending the difficulty is not real. Research on social support and achievement from Stanford University found that honest, challenging relationships produce stronger long-term outcomes than purely encouraging ones. The person who never gives up is usually surrounded by people who respect them enough to be honest. Empty encouragement does not sustain effort. Real accountability does. Now consider this for a moment. Every quality described in this video is something that was built, not inherited. Nobody arrived with a perfect relationship with failure or an unshakable internal narrative. These things were constructed through experience, through loss, and through the slow accumulation of choices made in difficult moments. The 11th thing that makes these people different is that they have sat with the real possibility of not making it. They did not dismiss it. They did not bury it. They looked directly at it, felt how uncomfortable that was, and then chose to continue anyway. That is a specific kind of courage. Psychologist Rollo may describe courage not as the absence of fear, but as the capacity to move forward while fear is present. The person who never gives up is not fearless. They have simply refused to give fear the final word. That refusal is a practice, not a personality trait. The 12th thing is that they rest without guilt. This one surprises people. Persistence does not mean relentless forward motion without pause. It means understanding that rest is part of the process. That recovery is not a retreat. That stopping to breathe is not the same as stopping for good. Performance psychology research on elite athletes and high-achieving professionals consistently shows that deliberate recovery is a non-negotiable component of sustained performance. The person who never gives up has learned to rest strategically, not because they are tired of trying, but because they intend to keep trying for a very long time. The 13th thing is that they have learned to find meaning in the process itself rather than waiting for the destination to deliver it. If your satisfaction depends entirely on reaching the goal, the journey becomes something to endure. If meaning lives in the effort itself, the journey becomes a point. Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote that meaning is not found, it is chosen. His research and clinical work showed that individuals who locate meaning in their present actions, regardless of circumstances, demonstrate the highest levels of psychological endurance. Purpose does not wait at the finish line. It travels with you. The 14th thing is that they have made peace with being misunderstood. People around them often do not see what they are building or why it matters. They have learned to need that understanding less. Not because other people's perception stopped mattering, but because their own clarity became more reliable than external validation. Research on autonomy and self-concept from Deci and Ryan found that individuals who can maintain a stable sense of identity independent of social validation show significantly greater long-term persistence in difficult pursuits. Being misunderstood does not stop them. It has simply stopped being enough of a reason to quit. The 15th thing, and perhaps the most important, is that they have failed more than people who gave up. That is not a contradiction. It is the explanation. Every failure taught them something that prepared them for the next attempt. The person who never gives up is almost always the person who has tried the most times. Thomas Edison famously said he did not fail 10,000 times. He found 10,000 ways that did not work. Modern research on expertise from psychologist K. Anders Ericsson confirms this. The accumulation of failed attempts, carefully examined and honestly learned from, is what makes eventual mastery possible. Think back to where we began. The assumption that people who never give up do not feel pain, that they are built differently in some fundamental biological way that most people simply were not given. That assumption lets everyone else off the hook too easily. The truth is both harder and more hopeful than that. These people feel the same discouragement. They experience the same doubt. They sit with the same exhaustion. The difference is not in what they feel. The difference is entirely in what they choose to do while feeling it. What psychology consistently shows is that persistence is a skill set, not a character type. It is built through choices made in difficult moments, reinforced through reflection, and sustained through environments that support honesty over comfort. None of that is reserved for a special category of person. If you have stopped something that still matters to you, this is not a video about your failure. It is a video about what is still possible. Because every quality described here is available to you. Not easily, not quickly, but genuinely and specifically available. The people who never give up are not a different species. They are people who kept deciding, in small and private and unglamorous moments, that what they were moving toward was worth the discomfort of continuing. They made that decision not once, but thousands of times. And on the days when they could not make it cleanly, they made it imperfectly. They kept going while doubting. They continued while grieving. They moved forward while exhausted. That imperfect continuation is not a lesser version of persistence. It is exactly what persistence looks like from the inside. The question this video ends on is not whether you have what it takes. Psychology suggests that question is already settled. The question is what you are going to do with the next difficult moment when it arrives. Because it will arrive. And that moment is where everything either begins or stops. People who never give up are not defined by the absence of stopping points. They are defined by what they did at every stopping point they ever reached. They paused. They hurt. They questioned everything. And then they took one more step. That one more step, chosen freely in a difficult moment, is the whole answer.